song continues after the hey, hey, what?
What's the matter?
Yeah, but that part doesn't. It just what? That was a
Oh, the
meme for
meme.
years. So like I always knew there was the rest of the song, but like my brain refuses to want to keep going. Is because I'm
I
just
mean, it
hearing the meme.
doesn't change. You
Oh,
mostly
I know.
just
It's the
keep
whole
going.
song.
Hey.
Yeah, I go hey, you go hey,
Yeah.
and then I go what's the matter with the something? Alright. And then I go come and get your love. Yep. And then I go come and get your love.
I'm
There it
with
is.
down there.
You better be. You better be there.
But dude, I was very shocked because I had actually, before we rehearsed, played around with Sympathy for the Devil myself, and I was just like, it just doesn't work with the piano. Like, we're not going to be able to fill it out.
Yeah.
And then we got there, and Mason started like playing it on the toms and getting that intro going. And it all came, I was like, oh my God, no, it sounds really good. We can totally do this.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, man. All right. All right. All right. All right. All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
And I did relearn Saturday Night. Is
Is it all right for fighting?
acceptable for engaging?
It's only acceptable. Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it is
Acts of
acceptable. for fighting.
fisticuffs.
I love to engage in fisticuffs only on Saturday night, though.
Yeah, I think that would be fair.
It's not all right.
That would be
any
the
other
one
day.
time that is acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, that's not the right second album. It's only the artist that I did. There we go. Nick, how would you feel about starting?
I would love to. Are you ready for me to count down?
I'll be ready for you so soon.
Okay.
I'm ready for you now, actually.
3, 2, 1.
Bam boo totem talks. Totem talks, totem talks. Totem talks, totem talks.
I was so hoping you were going to find a way to do that because I was singing that in my head for a while earlier today, and I could not figure out like totem talks. Podcast.
Oh yeah, no, just like you just got to do the word totem talks, just like he does the word. Well, the words,
right?
Which we'll talk about,
of course, obviously.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Totem Talks. This is season 8, episode 3, and we are taking it back to the roots of rock.
That's right.
That's our plan. If you have no idea what's going on, especially with such an ejaculatory introduction, we'll say.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. Thank you. We are Totem Talks. We are two fine men. I don't know about young anymore.
Yeah, no.
There was a time.
There was
who have made it our true life's mission, our never ceasing quest to find the greatest musical artists of all time. Whether that be a band, a solo artist, a small woodland creature, we will leave no stone unturned.
That's right.
To find
could be a stone.
It could be a stone. Honestly, I mean, we've met bands that haven't met, but we've studied bands through the course of this that have played the spatula.
That's right.
So really, it's all up for grabs.
That's right. We're willing to listen to anything.
Honestly, so true. And we have continued our quest today, our quest to find the greatest musical artists of all time. And Nick, I'm not even going to ask you the question I normally ask you because I typically only ask you that question when we're guaranteed that the answer is no. Right. But I don't think we're guaranteed that the answer is no here.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're getting at. And I was going to say, like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, like
It's worth hearing us out and finding out.
for sure. Okay. So without any further ado, you're Nick. I'm Pat. We're Totem Talks.
That's right.
And who are we covering today?
Well, we're kicking things off, obviously, as hinted at by your beautiful introduction, with Little Richard. And then we're moving on to Chubby Checker.
A true battle of the Titans.
Indeed.
And it's going to be an interesting one for sure. I think, obviously, because we paired them together. So just a really quick snippet. Earlier on in our Totem Talks career, we were doing 3 artists per episode. And
totally random.
Yeah, totally random. Just 3 artists trying to encapsulate a wide audience of music in one episode. And I think for a time it worked. It really helped us, I think, get our feet wet in, changing up and trying to things. But I think we both really enjoyed the moments when the stars would align and there'd be really concise comparisons to make in episodes.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And so we changed format a couple seasons ago to 2 artists who much
have
more
something.
Closely, have something in common. At times, it has been a very tenuous connection.
Yeah, right. It could be genre. It could just have something to do with like the name of the band, and they could play completely different music. So
or like both. My favorite one is both. Both artists appeared on The Office.
Yeah, that's right.
Something that really brings
the
people together. Yeah,
exactly.
So always an interesting thing. I don't think you can question the connection between the 2 artists we have today.
No.
It seems pretty straightforward that these artists are similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss the differences as well. And we'll find out the clear winner. I do think there is one. I can't wait to talk about it. So with that all out of the way, I'm going to just get us started, man. So
Little Richard.
Richard Wayne Penniman, more commonly known as Little Richard, was an American singer, pianist, and songwriter who was active from 1947 until he passed away in 2020. We covered 3 albums from Little Richard. We started with Here's Little Richard, the eponymous debut of Little Richard, came out in 1957. We followed that up with Little Richard is Back, and There's a Whole Lot of Shaking Going On from 1964. And then we wrapped things up with Little Richard Meets Masayoshi Takanaka from 1992.
So excited.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the albums, our formula has been adjusted slightly here. Our typical formula is first album, last album, and then most popular album, whether by sales or by charting. And we did mix it up a little bit here, mainly for 2 reasons. Here's Little Richard and Little Richard were technically the first 2 albums, 1957 and 1958. I decided that it would be a better idea because Little Richard's career spans 40 years.
Sure, yeah.
To put something a little closer to the middle. So I thought Little Richard is Back and There's a Whole Lot of Shaking Going On was a better second album. It was a chart success, just like Little Richard was. But it also encapsulates him coming back to rock and roll after years being like a minister in Christianity.
Yeah, right.
So I thought that was a more important telling of his story. And then same thing with the last one. Technically, his last released album was an album called Southern Child from 2005. But that was actually originally recorded in 1972 and just shelved and not released. So I thought we're not really getting the full scope of his career if we do that one. So I thought Little Richard Meets Masayoshi Takanaka was better. It was recorded in 1992 and released in 1992. It just makes more sense. We get a bigger scope of his career.
Yeah.
And honestly, I love all you listeners, but go fuck yourselves. This is our podcast, so
we make whatever we want.
We make the rules.
Yeah.
We make the rules, but actually I love you. Now, with all of that out of the way, all of the verbiage, let's go to Here's Little Richard. And it starts off, I mean, first
The same way
song.
this episode did.
Yeah. First song is Tutti Frutti, which is unquestionably the biggest Little Richard hit. I mean, there's a number of other songs
Yeah, but
that Little Richard is known for, but Tutti Frutti is the song.
It's hard to argue with you with that.
Right. I think there's maybe one other potential song that you could argue, and it's also on this album, and it's Long Tall Sally.
Definitely.
So those are the two big Little Richard tracks.
I've been telling you to learn how to sing.
I know.
Hey, you would have to scream at the top of your lungs the whole time.
I feel like to sing most Little Richard songs, I would have to do that.
That's true.
The man has sheer electricity coming out of him when he's performing. I like his performance reminds me so much of James Brown in terms of but except whereas James Brown would take like long breaks in the middle of songs and or albums to just have dance music play, and then he would like loudly proclaim things over them,
like at least later on in his career for sure.
Yeah, like in the middle of where we were working on with listening to him earlier.
Yeah, like the Payback.
Little Richard is just all singing and yelling and craziness, which is it's enjoyable, and this album was enjoyable. I thought two things right off the top of my head from listening to it. There's a lot of similarity in these songs, which is totally fine, but there's like Tutti Frutti, and then there's Ready Teddy, and then there's Slippin' and Slidin', and there's a lot of songs where it's like, oh, this you had like a chord progression and you just liked it.
Sure.
So that, but it's not even a knock because they're all different enough and enjoyable enough, and it's a quick listen. I mean, it's the 50s, so this album at 28 minutes is like right on par.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I noticed is like he wrote a lot of these songs.
Yes, he did.
I was not expecting that, to be perfectly honest.
Sure.
I was expecting maybe a couple credits of writing, but like the fact that he wrote Tutti Frutti, or at least is one of the two writers on Tutti Frutti.
And he's the first listed.
He's the first listed writer. He's the first listed writer on most of these songs. It was an impressive realization for me. So I think that, coupled with the fact that it's a good album. I mean, Little Richard's vocals sound good. He's got a powerful voice. He's not like a crooner or a belter. He's like a yeller.
But it works.
Works. It works for his voice. Yeah. And I think that his piano playing also was really strong.
Yeah.
So all in all, a surprising amount of enjoyment. I thought I would tolerate to maybe like it, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I also really, really like this record. I didn't need to get very far into it to know like Little Richard's probably going to win most episodes that he's on, because you already know the legend status going in, but then it just becomes like, albums of this era, how much is repetitiveness or not writing songs or this or that all going to like chip away. But no, like you mentioned, he's doing a lot of writing. He's an amazing performer. Like, definitely, I think the comp to James Brown in terms of like his electricity that he brings. Like, it's so clear on all these songs. Would have been an incredible person to see live, I'm sure. And a lot of these songs, whether he wrote them and recorded them first, or recorded other versions, or like he recorded them and then 10 other artists recorded famous versions, like his are arguably the best versions of all of them. Like, there's no song on here where I know other, like Ready Teddy, Elvis, Buddy Holly, great versions of the song, but I wouldn't be like clearly better than Little Richard. Or Long Tall Sally, who's everyone has covered, and I love the Beatles version of the song and everything, but like Little Richard, man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
So all around super impressed by this record. And then going into Little Richard Is Back, it's more of the same. I think he's a great musician. He's a great performer, and I'm thinking, like, at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start just listening to more of his albums, like, regardless. He's like solidified himself as, I listened to 4 Little Richard albums today when I only had to listen to 3. Like, he's solidified himself as someone I'm gonna listen to more because of this show.
Yeah.
Um, and what I think is really impressive compared to a lot of other like roots of rock and roll musicians is that his albums stand up pretty well in their entirety. Whereas with a lot of those people, it's like, yeah, they had all these great hits. And if you put on a greatest hits album, or if you took like 4 or 5 of these old school rock and roll artists and made a playlist of all their hits together, it would be great. But the individual albums start to feel a little boring and like some of the songs aren't as strong. I'm not getting that from him. I'm not getting that vibe at all.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree with you. Let's get the one negative out of the way for this album in comparison to the first album. And there is reason behind it. So, as I mentioned, this was his like comeback to rock and roll from a hiatus for a few years where he was like really delving into his faith and Christianity and recording gospel music and not in the rock and roll world. So he kind of got coaxed back into rock and roll. And so these songs are all either covers or written by other people. He's not contributing to the writing on this album.
Yeah.
But it was more of a ploy to get him back into rock and roll in general than he wasn't sitting here creating this album. So that's the one knock. However, entertainment wise, still crushing it, still like just this electric quality to the performance that I enjoy. Still got that yelling going on. Here we do have the first song where I would say another version is more popular, and that's Hound Dog.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So Hound Dog is pretty much Elvis's song that everyone else does.
Agreed.
And that's fine.
But I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed his cover of it, but unlike what you said earlier, where like other people did the song with Little Richard is the definitive version, I think this is the first time where it's not the case. But still an excellent album all the way through, as you mentioned. Still a fun listen all the way through.
Definitely.
And you got a lot of really good popular hits. I mean, Hound Dog is on here, as I said. Blueberry Hill's on here, which is great. A lot of good stuff.
Yeah. And he does make these songs a little bit his own too.
Yeah.
In a way that we'll get to with Chubby, but differently. I think Little Richard makes things his own in a better way.
Hey, well, spoiler alert, man.
Spoiler alert. But I'll explain more later. I'll wait. I'll save it.
All right. So I'll take us into Little Richard meets Masayoshi Takanaka, which is just as crazy as it sounds. Two people who are just so extremely different and yet get together and collaborate on just a real sick album. I mean, like Nick, you were already familiar with Masayoshi Takanaka.
Yeah, I'm a Takanaka fan.
And I was not. And so this was my first experience with him. What an incredible talent this guy's got. I mean, just crushing it. And it really adds an element that I wasn't expecting, because here's the thing. This is an album of mostly re-recordings. It's some new recordings, but mostly older hits, like Tutti Frutti's on here, Long Tall Sally's on here, Ready Teddy is on here.
Yeah.
A lot of like popular hits, but kind of
Kansas City.
Kansas City, but like redone, with a slightly older sounding Little Richard, and also just the absolutely shredding guitar chops of Masayoshi Takanaka. And it adds a layer and a more modern sound to all of those songs. And I didn't expect it to make as much of a difference as it did. And like, that's probably the version of Tutti Frutti I'm gonna like have to listen to.
Okay.
I thought it added a lot to a song that is fun and catchy, but like, let's be real, is rather simple.
Sure.
I thought it added a depth to it that I was not expecting.
Sure.
Also, I do think my favorite part, I know you mentioned a funny thing about the album. My favorite part about the album is that Masayoshi Takanaka's name is on the bottom, and it has Takanaka in big letters, and then Masayoshi as really small letters between them. And they did the same thing, but like the little word is little for Little Richard. So it's just Richard and then little and tiny.
Richard
and
Takanaka.
Yeah, it looks like a Richard Takanaka album.
You're right.
From afar.
You're right.
So I want to meet that guy.
I do too. That's pretty good. All right, so I largely agree with you on this record. I think Little Richard still sounds really good. His piano playing is obviously still killer. And the two things that really make this album work are Takanaka, because he's such a great compliment to Little Richard's playing too. And two, these were all like 2 to 2.5 minute songs originally, taken out like to 3 to 4 minutes. And now you still have everything you loved about the original, but you have more time to let the song breathe. And if you're looking for soloists to add some more great solos and space into the middle of your songs, Little Richard on piano and Masayoshi Takanaka on guitar, pretty good. They're pretty well up for that. So I think the songs benefit from being longer because you get these awesome solos that were not on the original records because they were just really condensing them down to short length.
Yeah, they were quick radio hits at that point, and now they can breathe a little more.
Exactly. The one thing I liked a lot the way that both Richard and Takanaka sounded on this record. I did think that the way that some of the other instruments were mixed wasn't quite up to that level.
Sure.
In terms, I really liked their sound, but I didn't love the way the record sounded for bass and drums and, like horns or whatever things were thrown onto the other songs. And then there was also like a rap verse in Lucille or something akin to that, which was
there
which was a
was,
thing.
I think, 2 moments through the album where I was like, is that a drum machine?
Okay.
It wasn't a drum machine the whole time. And there were other times when I was like, this is definitely a live drummer. So I don't know if maybe it is just part of the like recording of those instruments that was a little
I just
subpar and it made it sound
you know how
robotic.
sometimes certain production can sound like really live and energetic, which is I think one of the best things about an artist like Little Richard.
Oh yeah.
And other recordings, even if it's all live musicians and everyone's done a great job playing, can sound a little sterile. I just felt like the rest of it sounded a little sterile, but the piano and the guitar and the vocals did not.
Yeah, I think there is two ways that a recording of music can sound great, and I think they are both good in their own right. Way number 1 is what you're talking about, which is feeling like you're in a performance of that artist. I think Little Richard does it really well. We talked about James Brown. Another artist who does it really well was Fleet Foxes for a totally different reason, where like if you listen to Fleet Foxes albums, it sounds like you're in the room with them, like singing with all those effects in the production.
Like really.
Yeah. So like it's a different emotion that you're feeling, but it's that same vibe of like, I feel like I'm with them.
Sure.
And I think the other way that it can sound, which is completely different, is the music is recorded so perfectly that you don't even think about the fact that it's recording.
Sure.
Like it just you are completely not even thinking about it. So the production doesn't get in the way at all. It just lets the performance sing. And I think for a lot of music, that is the way to listen to it. And I think that it's one of those two ways. And if the production gets in the way, it can really fuck up a good album. Yeah. So that's but I think I get what you're saying. But I think that
I still found a lot to enjoy here.
Yeah.
To be clear.
Yeah, and I found Masayoshi Takanaka, which is great.
Yeah, I knew when you texted me about like the options, I was like, I already really like Takanaka. I think you might be interested in what he brings to the table.
Yeah.
Let's try that album.
Hey,
so I'm glad that we did.
I'm glad we did it too, and it made more sense. I mean, just in terms of the formula, like if he recorded albums into the 90s, why are we stopping listening at an album recorded in 1972? It just doesn't make sense. So glad that we kept going with it.
Yeah.
So I'll give a little bit of facts about Little Richard here. A lot of my stuff is combined, really.
Yeah.
Like there's really no separating this stuff. So I will start with my unique / part of my 6 degrees.
Okay.
And the unique thing for Little Richard is just that he is widely cited as one of the first crossover Black artists. He came to prominence in a time of like segregation in America and things like that, and
in the
where
media that we consume.
and in the media that we consume especially. And he was one of the first Black artists to really kind of break that barrier and have widespread appeal regardless of race.
Yeah.
So despite like the media and like popular leaders' time like to try to sustain that segregation,
Yeah.
he was one of the first breakthrough artists
Which, by the way, I feel like we never talk about this, but is this not like a huge reason why the enormous wave of popular rock and roll in the 60s and 70s comes from Britain, where all of those people were just listening to these American artists and they, there wasn't this like segregation of music. They'd be like, oh, Little Richard, that's great. Oh my God, Chuck Berry, we got to have all those records.
listen,
and then all the way back to the old blues artists, Robert Johnson, and like they had all these records, and that's what everyone who cared about music was listening to.
We could talk about it all day, and I'm gonna say something, and I know you'll agree with me, and I know that it's a hot take for a lot of people. I think if we are not segregated in the 50s and like the 40s and 50s, and we've already moved past that,
Sure.
I don't think Elvis is Elvis.
Oh God, no, because Little Richard and Chuck Berry or Elvis or Fats like
I
other
think
guys.
that Elvis became Elvis because he was an American little Southern white boy who was singing all of this music that was extremely popularized by Black artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that he was doing it maliciously or anything like that. I think he just
not that he wasn't a very, very, very talented
extremely talented. Nothing against Elvis, but I don't think he reaches king of rock and roll.
No.
Elvis Presley, the king status, if segregation didn't exist.
I agree.
So
somebody like Little Richard probably holds that.
Yeah, or you said Chuck Berry, and it could very well have been Chuck Berry, who we've already done this podcast, and it's hard to argue.
Yeah.
All right, but continuing on with that was the unique fact about him. He's one of the first credited breakthrough artists. Also, some of his contemporaries, which he performed with and things like that, but he's widely compared to, already mentioned Elvis Presley, talk about Buddy Holly, Bill Haley, Jerry Lee Lewis, which fuck that guy, but like,
that guy.
The comparison can be made.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So things like Eddie Cochran, a comparison can be made there as well. Although, as much as I like Eddie Cochran, I don't think he matches the energy of a lot of those other artists.
Very few match Richard's energy.
Sure, but I meant in general. I think all of those artists have like a similar energy that Little Richard just encapsulates to a very high level. And I thought Eddie Cochran was much more like low scale crooner, which I don't think it was a little weird. The comparison was given to me, and I was like, I'll talk about it, but I don't necessarily agree with that specific comparison.
Sure.
Moving on to the highlights, which also has a little sprinkling of 6 Degrees of Totem Talks. Tutti Frutti is the big highlight. It started a very big string of huge hits and number ones for Little Richard that spanned, he had 15 or more, 15 or more. I said he had 17 total number one hits in less than 3 years. Starting with 1955 when Tutti Frutti was released as a single before it was on the album. So like the dude was crushing it right out of the gate. Long Tall Sally was another one of them. It hit number one on the Billboard Rhythm and Blues bestsellers chart. And then in 1962, that's when he kind of started his comeback after he abandoned rock and roll for Born Again Christianity.
Right.
He did a tour of Europe, and that was also part of a second little highlight for him, his big comeback tour of Europe in 1962, as I mentioned. Okay. And Nick, in 1962 in Europe, you want to know who opened for some of Little Richard's tour dates in Europe?
The Quarrymen.
Yeah, it was. It was the Beatles.
Nice. Okay, very good.
It was the Beatles. So big little Richard 6 Degrees there. The Beatles themselves.
I love it.
Now, talked about unique, talked about 6 Degrees, talked about a highlight. There is some other stuff to talk about.
Okay.
About Little Richard. So, the first thing that could be considered a low light is this man's constant back and forth struggle with his sexuality.
Hmm.
It was a time where, you know, if you think that it's something that is persecuted and disparaged today, which I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying if you think that
Yeah.
in the mid to late 50s and early 60s, it was significantly worse. And that is just unfortunate. So he was kicked out of his house when he was 15 years old because his father caught him wearing his mother's makeup. He was for his effeminate mannerisms too, as well, because he's a very flamboyant gentleman.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, and in 1985, Little Richard explained that his daddy put him out of the house. He said he wanted 7 boys, and he had spoiled it because he was gay. That is a quote from Little Richard. So, however, that bounces back and forth a lot. Little Richard, in 1982, so this is, previous to that 1985 interview, said that God had given him the victory because he's not gay now, but he was gay all of his life. He was one of the first gay I was one of the first gay people to come out, but God let me know that he made Adam be with Eve, not Steve. So I gave my heart to Christ. So, like, reading the quotes back now with the context and, like, hearing this story happens so often in people's lives where just, like, the constant back and forth. So, in his 1984 book, he had a quote where he demeaned homosexuality as unnatural and contagious, and then he told somebody named Charles White that he was omnisexual. He also in 1995 told Penthouse magazine that he always knew he was gay, saying he'd been gay all his life. And then in 2017, once again denounced homosexuality in an interview with Christian Three Angels Broadcasting Network, calling homosexual and transgender identity an unnatural affection that goes against the way God wants you to live. So, reading all of that, it's very easy to harshly judge Little Richard for his really heinous quotes against homosexuality. But again, barely reading between the lines, you can see that this was a gay man who just
was really
was really struggling, battling between, his own faith and the faith that was, put upon him by his family. His mother's dying wish was that he continue his Christianity, and he vowed to do so. So, it was just a really bad struggle back and forth. So, while I vehemently disagree with his actual quotes,
of course,
I understand
the context of it.
The context of it, and it's just unfortunate that he had to do that back and forth. In other news, for a born again Christian, Little Richard was also kind of a freak. Real big into voyeurism. So he used to have a female friend that would let him, she would drive around with him in the car and just pick up dudes and fuck them in the back seat of the car while he watched in the front seat of the car. Okay. That was just a thing that they would do together.
Like all friends do when they're hanging out.
Yeah, and he actually got caught with that in 1955. So he was 23 years old.
Oh, wow.
He got caught by the police with that whole situation in voyeurism and had a little issue with that. He spent 3 days in jail and was temporarily banned from performing in Macon, Georgia because of that.
Very Puritan for my
pretty wild.
Right. Tell the crowd to disperse and move on with their lives. That's pretty much all you need to do there.
Yeah. Let's see some other improprieties from Little Richard. Though there's a list. He regularly participated in orgies. In 1962, he was arrested for spying on men urinating in toilets at a busway station in Long Beach, California.
Okay. So I I disagree with the concept of those two things being said at the same time, because one of them is none of my business and doesn't hurt anyone, and the other one is a crime. You
Oh,
can't, like, be spying on like,
I agree. I
one of those things is
agree.
just, like, whatever, and the other one is like, you can't do that. You definitely can't do that.
Listen, orgy's not my cup of tea, but you do
But I don't
you. You
care.
find your bliss and be happy. I don't
It's
care.
not my business.
But yeah, don't spy on people peeing in toilets, men or
Exactly.
women or anyone in
Anyone.
between.
Anyone.
It's a pretty hard line to not cross.
Agreed.
So yeah, that's that. He also had to leave Oakwood College in 1957 after exposing himself to a male student. So clearly, just a man who constantly struggled with
Oh, yeah.
feelings of perversion and repressing them constantly, and then having
100%.
them leak out in awful ways.
Yeah.
Coupled with the fact that his other low light is he was heavily, heavily involved in drug use and abuse.
Checks out.
He started in the 1950s as a complete teetotaler, didn't even
Okay.
smoke cigarettes, no alcohol, no cigarettes, no drugs.
Mhm.
And then by the mid 1960s, he was drinking, smoking pot. In 1962, he developed a hardcore addiction to cocaine. And he actually said about
Which is
that period.
crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
of all the people who would never need to use cocaine, I feel like Little Richard's at the top of the list.
dude. I mean, you're not kidding, especially since that whole first album we listened to,
Yeah, he was.
he
He
was
wasn't using
a
it for that.
teetotaler.
Yeah.
So definitely didn't need it for the pick me
No.
up. However, he did say about that period of his life that they should have just called him Lil Cocaine because he was sniffing so much of that stuff.
Yeah.
In 1975, he had heroin addiction and a PCP addiction.
Trying to balance.
Yeah, and at this point, his addictions to drugs and alcohol started to affect his career and personal life.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, he would as a quote, he would say he did whatever he had to do to get cocaine. He once had a friend threaten him with a gun because he didn't pay his drug debts. A lot of crazy shit about Little Richard and drugs.
Sure.
Seems to he did give them up after a very tough year in 1977. He lost his brother to a heart attack. He had another nephew who he really loved like a son who died in an accidental shooting. He had two friends, close personal friends, get murdered, and one of them was a valet at the heroin man's house. It was a quote. So a lot of tough stuff, and that year, 1977, really convinced him to give up drugs and alcohol and rock and roll a second time and return to the ministry.
Right.
So a lot of stuff there. Now, meanest and nicest, I didn't really. I'm sure if I really dove, I would find a lot of philanthropy for Little Richard. I know that he used to be on Sesame Street, and that was fun. And they would talk about causes and stuff when he was on it. That's where I knew him from. I grew up seeing him in Sesame Street. However,
I can't believe you didn't mention The Brave Little Toaster.
Honestly, you're right.
Brave Little Toaster, a film that was my first exposure to Tutti Frutti.
Brave Little Toaster, incredible film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go watch it after this.
Honestly, I might too. That's fun. And it's probably Nick. It's probably so much
good.
It's probably so good, but it's probably so much shorter than you think.
It's gonna end up being like 68 minutes or something.
Let's see. I gotta look it up now. Brave Little Toaster runtime.
Which, by the way, since you didn't include this in your 6 degrees, Tutti Frutti was included on the Brave Little Toaster soundtrack, and also the actress Mindy Stern provided voices for that. You would know her as Frau in the Austin Powers movies.
Okay.
She was also in the film Despicable Me 3, and the music for that film did feature a song by Madonna. So that would have also worked as your 6 degrees of totem.
Fascinating.
Also, Little Richard was in a film in 1993 called The Pickle. with Ali Sheedy.
Okay.
And Ali Sheedy briefly dated Richie Sambora from Bon Jovi in the 80s.
Fascinating.
So you could have used that as your
Okay,
6
look at
degrees.
you.
And now I am done.
Real quick,
I
we gotta talk a little bit about the cast of Brave Little Toaster. This is
Oh, I would love
crazy.
to.
This is very important.
important.
So I didn't know. I guess I should have known that John Lovitz was the vacuum tube radio,
Vacuum, oh, okay.
but
Yeah, okay.
the upright vacuum cleaner, that is Thurl
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Ravenscroft.
Yes.
That is Thurl Ravenscroft, who the average listener may not know the name, but you've definitely heard him because he's the one who sings "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch."
Mr. Grinch.
Shocking. Also, Phil Hartman is
Yeah.
the air conditioner.
Love Phil Hartman. That's great.
Okay. We can stop talking about Brave Little Toaster, but it is 90 minutes long.
For now.
Longer than I
Oh,
thought.
wow, okay. Yeah, agreed.
The last thing that you could call kind of a mean thing, which I'll say, in 1956 or around 1956, Richard was involved with a college student named Audrey Robinson. Now, I just want to be clear here. Little Richard was born in 1932. Okay, just so we can all do math together. 1956 would make him 24 years old. That's math.
Okay.
32 to 56. Sure. Audrey Robinson at the time was 16.
Sure.
Not great. They quickly got acquainted together, even though Audrey Robinson, not a rock and roll fan. In his 1984 autobiography, Richard said that he used to invite other men to have sexual encounters with Audrey Robinson and name dropped Buddy Holly as one of them. Yeah.
Good for him. Way to get another 6 degrees in
there. Great 6 degrees to have. Audrey Robinson did deny that statement, but I'm tempted to believe Little Richard because Little Richard, like, his whole past is about being an orgy attending, like, voyeur. So it does seem really par for the course that he would do that. And this is not an indictment on Audrey Robinson.
Not at
you
all.
were 16 years old at the time. I'm not judging you for shit.
No.
I'm judging Little Richard, and now I'm kind of judging Buddy Holly. But not judging you. She refused his marriage proposal, became a stripper/socialite. But the real mean thing is like publicly outing that you made a 16-year-old have sex with other people for your entertainment.
Pretty major low light.
Thought that
is wrong.
But it's pretty clear that he is at that point, right?
I'm gonna be honest
out.
With you.
I thought I might have cut out.
You totally cut out for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I did have the pop-up that said I was having connection trouble. But what I was saying was reading all of the stuff about Little Richard's, like his whole sexuality, his whole I mean, he's bisexual, right? Maybe leaning more towards men.
He could be.
But it seems like he's not into women, like, and he's definitely into watching women have sex, whether he's involved or not.
He's deeply confused.
So he's deeply confused and conflicted man, and it's a shame. Wonderful performer. A lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. However, not as much as we've had on this podcast before.
Yeah.
So that is my spiel about Little Richard.
I love it. And it is time for us to move from Richard to Chubby. No possible double entendres intended.
No, of course not.
We've got a guy whose name is Little Dick and then Chubby.
Well, I'm sure you'll mention Chubby Checker, right?
Chubby Checker, yeah, we're going to do a whole segment on him.
No, that I'm sure. Hold on, it has to be on his page.
Hold on, I gotta pee. And
okay,
then...
go pee. Bow, 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 bow. All right. I really hope he's going to talk about
I'm doing it right now.
Chubby Checker.
Yeah, I just thought he might. Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, let me back. All right, gotta get
Welcome
dinner
back.
ordered here before we start up again.
That is fine. No, but I was talking about I like again. I know about this colloquially,
Sure.
but I know that in like the mid 2010s, he like sued Hewlett Packard because there was an app or like a program or like a website or something that was called the Chubby Checker.
The Chubby Checker. Mm-hmm.
So, which is hilarious, and
it is hilarious. Indeed.
So, yeah, definitely pretty funny.
Yes. Okay. Dinner is ordered.
Good. Happy for
Did you end up getting... No, you probably didn't end up getting Indian after the last time we had a discussion. That wouldn't have worked out at all.
No, I did not. Soon though. I want to try that. What was it again?
Cauliflower Manchurian.
Cauliflower Manchurian. Okay, yeah. I got to try that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, as I started asking that question, I was like, no.
That would be one hell of a move I would have made.
Bold. I would have given you a lot of credit.
You know, I wouldn't have wanted it. I wouldn't have wanted the credit because it would have come at such a cost.
Yes, it would have.
All right. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Chubby Checker, born Ernest Evans, is an American singer and dancer who was active from 1958 until the present day. Still going strong, 83 years old. We covered 3 albums from Chubby. We started with Twist with Chubby Checker, the eponymous debut, and that is both artists this episode having an eponymous debut album. Shout out. It is always a welcome sight when we get the eponymous debut.
Right. You're right.
We followed that up with 4 Twisters Only, both of which came out in the year 1960.
Yeah.
Busy man in 1960. And then we closed things out with The Change Has Come from 1982.
That's right.
So, and we will discuss, or you will discuss, why there are albums after that.
Correct. So here we go.
Yeah, let's go.
Twist with Chubby Checker. Here's the thing. You might know one of these songs. It's called The Twist. Um, it was a pretty big hit for him. It was a pretty
Yeah.
big hit in general. Um, and there are a handful of other, like, well-known songs, the CC Rider Stroll, which is, like, based on CC Rider, a few other things like that. And, similarly to Little Richard, although not nearly as intensely, you definitely get the sense that Chubby is a performer on this record. He's an entertainer. He is having a lot of fun making the songs. So my compliment, which is backhanded, I guess, is I guess it's backhanded. It's backhanded. He's a one-trick pony, but it's like a fun trick. Uh,
Yeah.
but then the other part of that is that, well, he didn't even write the trick. He didn't even come up with the trick himself.
No. The
Like,
big difference between these two
yeah,
is that he did
yeah,
not write his biggest hits,
exactly.
unlike Little Richard.
And then what also becomes very clear right from this first album, because the single "The Twist" was so popular, and I feel bad, and Chubby has talked about this too. Like, he gets so pigeonholed so fast that immediately, like, the twist is to Chubby Checker as the intro to Johnny B. Good is to Chuck Berry. It has to
Yeah.
appear at least 5 times on every album. Like,
Yeah. Truly, it is the albatross around Chubby Checker's neck at this
it
point.
is.
A
Yes.
double-edged sword for sure.
So that's the thing, like, this is kind of the epitome of what I mentioned that Little Richard rose above, which is it would be really fun to take 2 or 3 of these songs and mix them up with 2 or 3 songs from 5 or 6 other artists of the era and have a little '60s dance party.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree. Uh, this album is fun. This album, even more so than Little Richard's first album, I feel like you could start at track number 1, which is Twistin' USA,
Mhm.
and do a medley of all of the the songs, and people wouldn't even notice.
No.
Like, it's just so similar.
Mhm.
And it's basically one 30-minute song that has multiple bridges. That's what
Yeah,
it
and
felt like.
sometimes the dance that you do to it changes.
Yeah, that's true. But, that aside, it's still enjoyable. Chubby Checker's
Yeah,
clearly got some talent. He's
he
got some
does.
singing ability. Clearly the man can twist.
Does
I
now, I don't we'll talk about this more when we get to the last album and what his voice quality is like on there. But were you also confused the whole time thinking, "Is that the timbre of his voice, or is he definitely singing with his throat instead of his diaphragm?" 'Cause he
I
has a little bit of
was
that Kermit the Frog sound.
I was pretty convinced by the end of the first album that he was fully throat singing.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know if that is like if he's really dancing that heavily throughout the whole performance, like if he's doing the twist the whole time, you're probably not engaging your diaphragm when you're singing. If you're engaging your diaphragm doing
The
like
twist.
aerobics
Yeah.
for the whole length of the song. So I
So,
don't know
yeah.
if that maybe had something to do with it. Like to
Okay.
be able to sing it out, he just had to only sing with his
Yeah.
throat.
Right.
But I did notice a lack
That
of
quality
power
in his
and
voice, yeah.
quality. But it is what it is.
Sure.
I guess I'll take us into For Twisters Only. And now here's the problem. This album came out in the same year, and not only the same year, 2 months later. So it's hard for me to say anything different.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Now, I like he started his like career in like 1958 and these albums came out in 1960. So I'm almost positive that like these are kind of an amalgamation of released singles that
Okay.
just kind of you know,
Mhm.
some interesting things. Uh songs that appear on this album that also appeared on Little Richard's second album.
Yes.
Blueberry Hill is the opening track. Hound Dog is also on this album. A Whole Lot of Shaking going on, also on this album.
Yep.
Like, I was kind of blown away by how many songs. Like, that's a big number of songs that are the same from the last one. And here's the unfortunate reality. All three of them are worse.
Absolutely. Now, I will give credit, despite the fact that this is the third best version, I guess, of Blueberry Hill that we've heard on the podcast behind Fats Domino and Little Richard. It is still definitively better than the worst version of that song that I've ever heard, which is by, so let's all say it together, Vladimir Putin.
Stop it. Hello, Keith.
You know the Vladimir Putin version,
yes.
I assume. Okay,
yes.
good.
Oh my God. Anyway, keep it on track here.
Right.
Again, they're not bad, but they're not as good as the Little Richard versions. And
exactly.
It's bad luck. Like, this is not something I knew because we picked our albums before either of us started listening. I was not expecting multiple of the same songs for a direct comparison between the two artists. And it just so happens that he went over 3.
For sure.
So yeah, not a whole ton of growth between albums, and that's really not his fault. It's just the timing of the two albums. The direct comparison is over 3, unfortunately, and he's not writing the songs. So it's 3 big strikes against Chubby Checker, even though for the most part it's still enjoyable to listen to.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Again, this we're not sitting here disparaging Chubby Checker as an artist. We're like, there's been plenty of artists that we've had.
It's an unfortunate comparison for him this week.
Yeah, plenty of artists that we've had that just suck. Chubby Checker is not one of them. It just is what it is. I'm like, it's like comparing. I don't know, Matt Stafford to Tom Brady.
Okay, sure, right.
Like, Matt Stafford's great, nothing against him, but he's not Tom Brady.
Right. Who
you know? Like, that's what I'm saying. So, like, it's nothing against Chubby.
Agreed. So I only wrote one note on this album, which was, this was a fun exercise in seeing how many popular songs you can shoehorn the word twist into.
Honestly, so true.
So the songs that I guess were new for this album include Mr. Twister. So like there's still Mr. Twister and Twist Train that are on this record.
Oh yeah.
But all the other ones, it does become twist, rattle, and roll at some point instead of shake, rattle, and roll. A whole lot of twisting going on. Like, we were this close to like him finding his thrill on Twistberry Hill. It was.
I would have respected it.
Yeah, because
I would have respected it if that was the
you ain't nothing but a hound dog twisting all the time happens in this album.
Yeah, of course it does.
So that's the thing, and this is why I actually just feel really bad for Chubby, because he just gets so pigeonholed into this specific thing. Like, he had the most successful novelty record in the history of humanity, and everything he ever did for the rest of his life afterwards had to in some way be tied into that novelty record.
I mean, is this not truly the curse of the one-hit wonder, though?
It truly is.
It's a one-hit wonder at its most successful.
It would be like if, I don't know, pick another one-hit wonder band. Like, I know they're not in other countries, but in the United States, Aha, Take On Me, huge one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
That would be like, okay, every song has got to be about taking you on from here on out. No matter what you write, you have to cheekily throw the words "take on me, take me on" into it every single song for the rest of your career. Even if you put out cover albums, you will have to strangely squeeze those words into the lyrics somehow.
Oh yeah. Oh, is there a better example? Aha's a good example.
You think of that. And I'll get into his last album while you're thinking about that. The Changes Come. So he, at least according to the discography page on his Wikipedia, there are 2 other studio albums after this. I tried to find them ahead of time on streaming services and YouTube alike. and I could not find a single thing. So I was like, well, we might as well just do an album that we can listen to. So I started with 2001's Towards the Light, couldn't find it, so I moved to the Texas Twisting in 1994 because of course Twist still. And then that didn't work out, so I went to 1982's The Changes Come, which you can find on YouTube.
Yes.
And here is where there's a lot of growth. These songs are not about doing the twist.
Honestly, they're not.
And for Chubby, I feel like that's probably like the best thing that could have ever happened to him. And I get like,
is it though?
I guess. I mean, look, this was not my favorite album that I've ever listened to, but at least it was different from the first two. I'm going to give him credit for the fact that these songs, while not groundbreaking, he was at least like playing catch up with the times. It's 1982. He made it all the way to like 1977.
I disagree.
You think he went further?
I think this album is firmly in the 80s with the
I guess I'm thinking like
of
the
80s.
soundscape, the 80s, the songwriting style, the late 70s.
Sure. I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
I could not get over how absolutely ingrained in the 80s sound this album was from Chubby Checker.
And that's so much the production. Very similar to, yeah. And there's a weird cover of Under My Thumb. I couldn't figure out. I don't know if you found anything. I was trying to find out what percentage of these songs he wrote, if any, because he didn't write on the first two records. Obviously, he didn't write Under My Thumb, which was the song on here that I definitively knew very well. And it was an interesting version.
Yeah, it was an interesting version.
It was an interesting record.
Yeah, I did not find
not one I'll revisit.
No, for sure. Here's the thing. It's not very good.
It's not.
It's not very good. And I don't mean that. I do mean that in a mean way. I'm sorry, Chubby. It's not a good album. It's extremely dated in a way that really only the 80s and 90s can be, I think.
Yeah, lots of changes in production sound made it very distinct. Although I think we'll look back and see like the whole 2010s into the 2020s production style of pop music to sound like all exactly the same.
Sure. I don't disagree. I think not enough time has happened but
it's so clear when you listen to like 80s production or early to mid 90s production, especially with like pop music. I mean, grunge is also super recognizable, but it doesn't have like those production signifiers in the way that the pop music of the 90s.
No, it's just for sure. I get what you're saying. Yeah. This album is firmly the 80s. It's got that like cheesy, over romanticized quality that the 80s music has.
That I love.
Yeah, totally. I know it's your favorite. He sounds fine on it. Like he doesn't sound bad.
And that's why I asked you that question earlier, because he got to this point and I'm like,
he's singing way better.
Swore that he was singing. Like I thought his voice was going to be cooked because of how much he was singing just from his throat. And then he still had a voice. And I was like, does he just have like a Kermity timbre?
He's got a Kermity timbre, but I think he more so in this. I think this album was not made to be him live dancing through a 40-minute album. So I think he was able to kind of let loose vocally a little more.
Sure.
And you definitely hear more power, less vocals or less throat singing, a little more diaphragm use.
Sure.
From a technical standpoint, I think it's a more consistent album. It's just super corny and cheesy and 80s. And that is rough.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me.
It does not work for me either. And it's such a shame because I really feel like if this album had worked, we would be talking about Chubby Checker in a different way. He wouldn't be that guy. Like, I think this really screams to me like the record to try to break him out of being the twist guy.
True, but there were others in between, which I will mention.
Cool, and I'm
But yeah,
excited to
he
hear about.
definitely wanted to make that. Like,
Yeah.
that was important to him to get away from it.
Yeah, and honestly, I get it.
For sure.
This was
Right.
his Equus, which
Yes.
is such a reference that most people won't get, but the few that get it will get it.
Okay. Chubby Checker. I'm going to start with this highlight because that's the obvious thing that we need to get out of the way. It's for better or worse. You could argue it's also his low light for him personally, but it's the twist.
It's the twist.
The single sold 15 million plus copies. It's in the Grammy Hall of Fame. It's in the Library of Congress. It's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was named by Billboard in 2008 the most successful single in music history. It was the first and only song to hit #1 on multiple occasions years apart until Mariah Carey did it in the year 2020 in December because All I Want for Christmas Is You managed to do it.
Yeah,
but like
she awakens from her slumber.
Exactly.
I get it.
But like the twist is arguably the most successful single song in music history. Like it's got those kinds of numbers behind it. So that's a highlight, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
It would be hard not to. What's unique about him is actually how he got a start, and it might tell us a little bit more about who Chubby is, because he actually kind of made a name for himself before he got famous, imitating other artists. So, like starting as like being the class clown and going to performing for people as he was working, and like people starting to know him as.
Can I guess one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it a 6 Degree?
You would definitely get 2 6 Degrees here.
So just hearing his voice, I think the person he would imitate is Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis is one of them for sure.
Had to be. Cool.
So he was known for his impressions of Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Coasters, artists like that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how people knew his name, how he kind of got famous for locally in the Philadelphia area. We love Philly.
Love Philly. Go Birds.
Go Birds. For singing. And then also a Philly connection. He actually recorded his very first record as a novelty record that was the Christmas card for Dick Clark during the American Bandstand era, which famous, one of those famous shows about where artists would get their chance on TV in the early 60s that was shot in Philadelphia. But it is that like Dick Clark's private Christmas card that he sent out to like his friends and family and people is what earned Chubby his record deal because of his novelty recording on that.
Wow. That's actually really cool.
It's interesting, right? So, and I think it was Dick Clark's wife who gave him the nickname Checker for his last name.
Oh,
because his real name is Ernest Evans.
Yes.
So that's what's really unique. It's a very interesting.
Well, it's a big play
like
on
the novelty got him, like the doing the impressions and the novelty stuff, and he was doing that at first, and then it just trapped him for his life.
Yeah, I mean, Chubby Checker, like, and again, I'm not the one who did research on this. I just know this, like, it's supposed to be a play on Fats Domino.
Oh yeah,
Chubby Checker, Chubby Fat Checker Domino.
Checker Checker was the play on Domino after he had already earned the nickname Chubby.
Yeah, but
and then they were like,
the whole thing was,
for sure. And that was again one of the people he was like most known for imitating.
I get it.
So I'm gonna move to his low light and then the nicest. I'll wrap up with 6 Degrees. So his low light is so far, although this could change this year, his rejection from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's not made it in yet, and he actually like to the point where he was like complaining about not getting as much airtime as he should and getting as much consideration as he should.
Yeah.
He protested outside of the 2002 induction ceremony about not being recognized. But for the first time in his career, he was nominated this year, the year of our Lord 2025. So perhaps this will be the year.
I think if your biggest hit is in the Library of Congress, you probably deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, if your biggest hit is arguably the biggest hit of all time.
Yeah. I mean, well, we will talk about another hit on this episode that could be discussed in that way.
Sure, but I mean, just like in
In
terms of
terms of
15 million
overall. Yeah.
sold, in terms of being named by Billboard the most successful single in music history,
Yeah.
like
Well, so it's for different reasons. It's for different
sure.
like, spoiler alert, Tutti Frutti is what I'm talking
Mhm.
about, and, like, Tutti Frutti was number 1 on, Mojo's top 100 records that changed the world.
Sure, okay.
So, like, it's more
Yeah,
influential than
it's definitely
successful in
very
terms of
influential.
sales, but
Yeah,
there's arguments, but I get what
yeah.
you're saying, and
Def
I don't
Tutti
disagree with
Frutti, I
you.
think, is probably more influential than The Twist. The
Well,
Twist
it's
is
I
more
mean, if you hear
monetarily
Tutti
successful.
Frutti, you hear the,
The sounds
like,
of rock and roll.
the sounds of rock and roll that were used to exhaustion in almost every song
Yeah, for
post
sure.
Tutti Frutti.
Yeah.
Like, I think Tutti Frutti goes right up along with Johnny Be Good in terms of, like, songs that just shaped the way
Mhm.
music is played.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. So Nice Thing.
Yeah.
Chubby teamed up with Howard Pearl Entertainment, and they produced this musical tour called the Rock and Roll to the Rescue Tour, which raised funds for rescue animals in need nationwide. So good for him for
I
doing that.
like that. That's
I'm a
nice.
fan of that. He also has done like some commercials for Medicare and stuff like that because he got to that age of helping people raise awareness about
Yeah,
the things they have access to. So good for Chubby for staying involved, things like that.
for sure.
And now we get to the 6 degrees of Totem Talks, and I'm going to do something genuinely that I've never done before here.
Ooh.
So, in the Philadelphia area, there is a fairly prestigious music school at which Chubby Checker took piano lessons called Settlement Music School.
Yeah.
There are multiple different branches of it, but it's in the Philadelphia area school is known as one of the great music schools in the country that's been around for the last 100 years. Um, and he was named to their top 100 list of like the most influential students who have taken lessons there. Also on that list would be the the person for whom 6 Degrees of Totem Talks exists because of Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon is on that list.
He's on that list as he
Wow.
took lessons there. Stanley Clark, one of the all-time great bassists in jazz, was on that list. Albert Einstein, who came up with a theory of relativity,
Yeah.
also took some lessons there at the music school.
Okay.
And then getting a little bit closer to home, um, one of the great organists of our time, Joey DeFrancesco, who played with a ton of jazz greats and is also was the uncle of our bassists, our uncle-in-law of our bassist, the uncle of his wife, Brooke, Joey DeFrancesco, wonderful, wonderful organist. And also, I personally have taken lessons there at the Settlement Music School.
I was like, are you about to 6 degrees of Totem Talks to yourself?
6 Degrees of Totem Talks to myself.
This guy. This
We've
guy.
never actually been able to make that connection, but Chubby Checker and I both studied at
Now I gotta
Settlement Music School
find
for a time.
a connection to me. That's crazy.
Good
I'll do
luck.
it.
I've set the bar way up here.
I mean, you did. I don't think I can tie myself a like legend in music and Albert Einstein all together.
Good luck, but I can.
Yeah, apparently.
And
Look at
Kevin
you.
Bacon,
And
the
Kevin
man who
Bacon.
invented the idea of, coming up with these degrees to connect people.
Gotta love it. Okay. Well, he didn't invent it, but his name
It was
invented it.
invented in his name.
Yes, correct. All right. Are you
I'm good.
complete then?
I'm done.
All right, let's grade them.
Excellent. So we'll
All
start
right.
with look. The answer is 10 for Little Richard,
Yeah.
unless
I
you
was
want to
like,
argue.
I was like, how could we argue against a 10? Like,
Okay, excellent.
Is there things that could argue against it? I don't think there is.
Okay.
Sustained success, worldwide renown, extreme popularity over decades.
Yeah, we've talked about people who are the absolute like foundational architectural acts of all the
Yeah.
music that follows them. And we've also talked about Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly in this category and Fats Domino in this category.
Yeah, and I think Little
Answer is
Richard is
10.
right up there in there. Give him a 10.
Yeah.
Chubby Checker.
Not a 10.
Not a 10. Now here's the thing.
But
I want to be
famous
clear.
name.
Yeah, a famous name who this is somebody who is not at all like even though we're talking about him as a one-hit wonder, we're not giving him one-hit wonder
He
points.
had
He's status.
23 top 40 singles in his
Yes.
career. They probably all had the word twist in them
Yeah,
somewhere.
they all had the word twist in them, though.
But he had 23 top 40 singles, like, for his brief stint from, like, 59 to 63, 64, he was just, like, making hit single after hit single.
Yeah. No, for sure. I
And
completely
he
agree.
may end up being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame after this year.
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah, you know, like, get him in there. And he's in the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame and all that stuff, but, like, he needs to, um, he needs to get some points here.
Some added points that we didn't have to talk about with Little Richard because both of them do have this, but Little Richard was already a 10 before this comes into play.
Yeah.
Chubby Checker has had multiple, like, appearances in, like, television shows and film. I like, just reading a couple of them. He was in an episode of Quantum Leap. He was in an episode of Ally McBeal. Just show it that there were a couple things.
Yeah.
Where he was, like, in the popular zeitgeist in popular culture.
And the twist is one of those hits that's just more than a point in and of itself. It's just so ubiquitous. It is everything. Like, I think he still gets a solid score here.
Yeah, I agree.
It's probably above the average even, especially with the level of name recognition. That's something like, even the name Chubby Checker probably means something to most people, even if they don't necessarily associate him with the twist. Or vice versa.
And I mean,
everyone knows the concept of the twist. Like, you've heard of the twist, whether you even know Chubby Checker sang it or not.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think that even though he's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he's in the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame.
He might this year end up in the Rock and Roll.
And listen, I think he should, and I hope he does. I mean, if they're nominating people like Eminem, put Chubby Checker in.
Exactly. Definitely rock and roll.
It's rock and roll.
Yeah.
So what are we thinking here? Like, do we think a 6?
I think a 6 would be perfect.
Let's give him a 6.
I love it. Now we move on to breadth of work. Little Richard, how many records did he have?
So Little Richard has 19 studio albums.
That's a lot of studio albums. That's going to start him with a 6.1.
Yeah.
Do we know how many sales?
So there is not anything listed for sales. There was a lot of shaky stuff back then, as we talked about, in terms of sailing, keeping and stuff. None of his stuff, like, I don't see certification things.
Okay.
For him, unfortunately.
I don't believe that his singles didn't sell.
He's
got so many famous, huge, timeless singles that I'm not gonna take any points away from him.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing.
That would just be wrong.
Just quick searches through 2 or 3 different sites. I'm seeing that he's sold roughly 30 to 32 million records internationally.
Okay, now we're talking. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's in line for a boost here instead of.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's just so widespread over all of the singles released, the multiple different ways they were released, like, no single release of something appeared to certify, at least in a way that I can track.
Sure.
But the total cumulative sales show.
Okay. So, I mean, our rule, as a reminder, is you must give at least a half a point for 50 million records. But we have room to play with that. He's got to get at least the 0.4, I think, to start him at a 6.5.
I think a 0.4 works.
Okay.
I think a 0.4 is good.
How many points would you like to award him?
Listen, I think there's 2 big pluses for me. The pluses are the energy in the performances.
For sure.
And the plus is that he wrote the big ones.
Yep.
That's a big thing for me. He wrote the big ones. So for that reason, I'm going to give him a 0.3.
Excellent. And so will I. And so he will go to 7.1.
Cool.
And now, Chubby Checker.
Chubby.
Look, I don't know about his other albums. They may not have done as well. But the twist itself scored 15 million copies. man's earning some points here.
It's doing it.
So we got to give him at least like a 0.2 or a 0.3.
Yeah.
Do you prefer one of those numbers?
Let's give him a 0.3. Let's give him a 0.3.
Let's do it. I'm going to give him 0.1 for quality on top of that. Because I still enjoyed the first two records, even though definitely wouldn't like listen back to them in their entirety again. I think he's a good performer.
Listen, I will also do that. I also see something, just a little fun thing. If you mentioned this, I was disassociating at
Yeah,
the
go
time.
right ahead.
The Twist appears twice on the charts.
Mm-hmm.
So it appeared in 1960.
Yep.
And then it appeared again in 1962.
Right, and it was the first song to do that.
It was a chart re-entry, and it's the first song.
Mariah Carey in 2020.
Yes.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, that's what you mentioned? Okay, good. So
Yeah.
I was disassociating from that first part. That's crazy. I mean,
crazy.
that's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Instrumental talent. One of these guys is a much better singer, and one of these guys is a really good piano player.
Yeah.
Little Richard's going to score pretty high here for me. Chubby Checker is going to do fine.
He's fine. He's fine. Let's talk
Little
about
Richard. I think is minimal. A floor of 8.
I would completely agree with a floor of 8. I think you're talking about, again, an energy and electricity in the vocal performance itself.
Yep.
That also doesn't lose talent. When I said he's a yeller, not a belter, like that is so.
Yeah, it's unique.
That is such a fine line between sounding good and sounding fucking terrible.
Yeah,
like it's so.
He yells
close.
about as well as anybody in singing ever has.
It's truly impressive stuff. And that even if you take away, I think this guy would be an 8 if you took away the piano.
And he's a very good piano player.
And I think when you put the piano in, you're talking like in the 9s.
I'm fine with giving him something like a 9.
Let's give him like a 9.1.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I think.
Yeah, he's really excellent, and his piano playing too is so influential.
Yeah.
Like if you hear what he's doing rhythmically, especially in his right hand on the higher notes on the piano, this becomes standard practice. Like
the way truly does, and it's one of those things where, we talk about the whole like standing on the shoulders of giants and the shoulders of those who came before you. This is exactly what it is, and it's again the comparison to Chuck Berry is there. It's like Chuck Berry for piano.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
So much of what became
honestly the real comparison here is Jerry Lee Lewis. If we're being real in terms of who they are, when they were popular, the popular songs they put out.
Hate him.
Right. The skills on piano, the clear and obvious most similar artist to a guy like Little Richard is Jerry Lee Lewis, though.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but my comparison is strictly in the fact that like if you can hear definitive like sections of Chuck Berry music, especially early Chuck Berry music, where you just hear things that are everywhere in rock and roll ever since then, and to the point where you almost discredit Chuck Berry because you're like, oh, everything this guy's playing is like what everybody else is playing. It's like, yeah, but he's doing it 15 years earlier than everyone else.
Yeah, for sure.
If he wasn't doing this, and Little Richard's the same way. If Little Richard wasn't doing this, other people would not have been doing what they're doing ever since then.
Yeah,
that's huge. So I think another one. Chubby
Checker. Look, he is a good singer.
He's a good singer. Yeah, a little Kermity Froggy.
Little
Kermity at times. Which is a shame because I think on the last album, as much as we're disparaging the last album, his vocals like prove that he didn't need to sing like that.
Right. Look, he was like a class clown imitating other singers. He didn't have that like vocal training for a while. And
very Sandler-esque.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd be willing to give him in the high 4s or a 5.
Let's give him a 5. I think he's at least average.
Excellent. Song rating. Little Richard wrote the hits. Little Richard I mean, like, again, we've talked Chuck Berry, we've talked Buddy Holly, we've talked Fats Domino. Little Richard, arguably, as much as any other artist in the history of music, shaped the sound of rock and roll to come with what he wrote.
Yeah, and I mean, just another little mention about Tutti Frutti. I mean, written by Little Richard and like considered one of, if not the most influential song, like a record that changed the world of rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's in the Library of Congress, as you
Right.
mentioned about the Twist, in the Library of Congress, in the Grammy Hall of Fame. It's the Rolling Stone which again, not the most trustworthy of musical sources. I want to be clear, but it did rank Tutti Frutti as the most inspired rock lyric ever recorded. The wop baba loo baba wop bamboo.
Yeah, gotta love that.
Like, I mean, hey, and I mean, you're not going to tell me it's not one of the most catchy things.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like it's Tutti Frutti walked. So ball with the ball, the bow, the bow.
No, come on. Why that? Now I don't
just because I wanted to see your face.
But this is one of those things where, yes, the music is all like relatively simple and not complex. But Little Richard is one of the few cases where that can just pretty much be fully canceled out by the fact that he was basically inventing this as he went along.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this has got to be for the basicness of the, like, if any other artist like 10 years later comes up with this, they're going to get points below the average.
Yeah.
Little Richard is getting points above the average.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Like, if I make a painting that's all green, but I invented the color green, that's a lot of points.
Exactly.
I think we're looking, I mean, I think the floor is in the 7s.
Yeah, I was going to say a floor of around 7.5 for me.
Perfect. I think that's great. And I think, honestly, we maybe just give him an 8.
Yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it.
Like, just for the sheer success and the, like, the catchy quality of all of it, and the fact that he created all of it.
Right. Okay. So here's the thing with Chubby. He didn't write any of the songs on the first 2 albums we listened to. He may have written some of the songs on the third. He did definitely write the songs on at least a few of the albums in between.
Okay.
Of that I am certain, including the album Checkered from 1971, which was his, like, major attempt at getting out of the Twist trap.
What is that? And yo, that's a weird genre listing for Chubby Checker. I gotta listen to this album.
It's he attempted to make a psychedelic rock album, so you can tell that it's not a Chubby Checker sounding record when the first track is almost 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, this album flopped.
Sure, of course. Oh, of course it did. But did you listen to it at all?
No, I haven't yet. But
oh man, I gotta check this out because, like, seriously, I would love for this to sound good.
I would too,
because I really think that Chubby Checker had a lot of potential, and I do think he was really pigeonholed. Yeah. And
he also did a folk album in '64, which I don't think he wrote any of the tracks on. But I think essentially he wrote, like, he got away from the pigeonholing and he wrote like 2 or 3 albums worth of music, none of which, or some of which we maybe listened to, wasn't that great. It's a very low number. I'm just thinking, like, because he did at least write a couple albums worth of his own music for sure, even though we didn't cover it, I would want to give him something more like a 1 instead of like a 0.1 for not writing anything.
Let's give him a 1. I love it.
Okay. And then Poetic Talent. This is not the strong suit of either artist.
No, it's not. But I don't think it's supposed to be really for either one of them.
No, God, no.
Here's the I mean,
it is
again, we're dealing with the fact that Chubby only wrote a very small selection of his music.
Correct.
And not the popular ones.
Yeah.
But at the same time, going to Little Richard, I mean, a wop bop a loo bop a wop, like, Tutti Frutti is not a lyrical.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, of course you can.
Have you ever seen the original lyrics to Tutti Frutti before he had to change it so he could record it and make it a famous hit?
Uh, no, but I'm assuming there was some type of curse word then.
Oh, well, I'll tell you. The original lyrics were Tutti Frutti, good booty. If it don't fit, don't force it. You can
Oh,
grease it, make it easy.
is that about sodomy?
Yes, that's very good. That's
That
very
sounds like
good.
what it's about.
That is what it was about.
Hey, you know what? Checks out for fucking Little Richard. I
Of
mean,
course it does.
everything about Little Richard's biography makes sense there.
Correct.
Okay.
So I don't know if that one makes you want to give him more or less points.
Listen, I mean, that's not the version that
But go on.
Tutti Frutti, good booty. Oh
Yep.
man, okay. Yeah, neither artist is really striking or really hitting a home run here.
Yeah, I'm gonna be under the average for both. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
really far. Like Chubby Checker could get like a 0.3.
Yeah, so my number that I'm jumping to for Little Richard is like a 2.5.
I love it.
I think that, he contributed enough to songs that became huge hits and like lyrically catchy, even if they're not lyrically deep.
Yeah.
That you got to give him some credit for that. And like just his sheer number of hits that he contributed to. Got to give him that credit. Unfortunately for Chubby Checker, he did not write
that much.
And what he did write was unfortunately unsuccessful.
Right. X Factor is going to come into play. I think Little Richard comes into this with like a baseline of 3 X Factor points. Could potentially get the full 5.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about what could give Little Richard.
He gets 2 points for inventing rock and roll right off the bat.
He absolutely does.
I think he is for piano what Chuck Berry or Jimi Hendrix was for guitar. I think that gets him another point. And then you have a whole list of things.
Yeah, so I do. I mentioned a couple about Tutti Frutti itself being in the Library of Congress, being in the Grammy Hall of Fame, things like that. Little Richard was named in Time magazine as one of the 100 greatest and most influential albums of all time. Here's Little Richard, which we covered. Sure. Just some things like that. Tutti Frutti is on their list of 500 greatest songs of all time for Rolling Stone. But getting more into some other stuff, he was named the 2010 GQ Man of the Year in the Legend category.
Okay, sure.
But he's got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, the Georgia Music Hall of Fame in 1984. He has a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. He was honored along with Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley as the first group of BMI icons at the 50th annual BMI Pop Awards. He's in the NAACP Image Award Hall of Fame, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the Music City Walk of Fame, the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame, Apollo Theater's Walk of Fame, the Blues Hall of Fame, the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame. Like every conceivable Hall of Fame and or award that could be given for almost all of the music that he played. He's in it. He is a contributing member of it. I mean, it's hard to not say he's just a 5.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give it to him.
Like it's hard to it's hard to not just be like the sheer number of things.
I agree.
He's got to be a 5.
Yeah. Okay, Chubby Checker. I think the answer here is still the twist.
Yeah.
I think it transcends everything. Like I said, the most, at least Billboard.
I mean, we're talking X Factor,
the most
man.
successful single in the history of music.
I think if we're talking X Factor, we got to give him at least a little bit for the Chubby Checker.
Oh yeah, the Chubby Checker.
It was a thing, and I remember.
Okay, and he did sue about.
He sued HP over it, and they settled out of court.
Yes.
But just for the The Chubby Checker was a thing that came out in like the mid 2000s, I think. I don't remember when.
It was pulled officially in September of 2012. So before that,
Okay, so yeah, I think it was like 2007 or 8 or something like that. It was either an app or a website or both that was called the Chubby Checker,
right.
and it was it was fake. It was just like a funny like parody account app thing that you'd put in your shoe size and it would give you your penis length.
Estimated.
Your estimated penis length. And it was all arbitrary and it was just funny. But it was called the Chubby Checker. And
Correct.
so Chubby Checker was like,
hold on.
This can't
my name.
Yeah, this can't be what is happening here.
Right.
Because he had his name trademarked and everything. So even regardless of the image of it all, it was a trademark violation.
Yeah.
So, but it was I remember reading about it and I was not really as invested in like old school rock and roll music as I am now.
Sure. Yeah.
And I like Chubby Checker's name was being passed around a lot in that time. So that was definitely a thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm not saying it's worth like a bunch of points or anything, but it's definitely worth a little bit.
1 point something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll give him 1.2.
I love it.
And we'll call it a day. And I'll tell you, we do have a pretty clear winner today.
Yeah, I think we might have a contender for like top 5.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is, but I could hear some of those scores.
Yes. So winning this week's episode is Little Richard with a score of 41.7.
Okay.
So he's up there.
Top 10, maybe not top 5, but top 10.
He's up there. Yeah, for sure. And then not winning this week's episode is Chubby Checker with a 20.1.
Unfortunate that he didn't write.
It is.
Because that definitely affected the score.
It affected it
enjoyable listen. Honestly, it's hilarious because the album he sounded the album he sounded the best on was the worst album.
Correct.
And that sucks.
It does.
And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful to that Checkered is good. A psychedelic rock album / psychedelic soul album.
I'm fascinated by it.
I gotta listen to that.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll check back in about that next week. But make sure you come back next episode because we will be taking a trip to the zoo.
I know what that means, and
the bands will be animal name related.
I remember reading this and being like, "Oh my god, dude!" Great. Yep. I'm excited.
It's gonna be fun.
Cool. Well, listen, that's gonna wrap us up. And do me a favor, listen, okay? You're not as young as you used to be.
That's true.
After listening to all this dance music, ice your knees.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Ice your knees. Get some icy hot for your back. Take care of yourself, okay? That's important.
Message. And you know what else is important? Now, something we like to say all the time on this show is fuck Jerry Lee Lewis.
Honestly, so true.
But what we don't remind people enough is let Little Richard watch.
God damn it. Oh, God. Okay. Gotcha. I was not expecting that. Oh, wow. Man. All right. Okay. You know what? On that note, have a great day. Wow. Absolute cinema.
I'm glad that you enjoyed that.
That was great. That was great.
Oh, man.
Oh, you know what else is great?
Go ahead.
The Kick
freaking
spammers.
I know.
Great stream. I really enjoyed this game. You're performing well.
Yeah, we're performing so well at this
game. We're performing a game so well together.
So good. Speaking of performing at games, you know Chubby Checker had a daughter who was in the WNBA?
I did know that.
Good for her.
I did know that, yeah.
All right. My dinner is here. So I'm gonna
Cool,
go
cool.
eat that.
Now, hold on. This is important.
I'll wait.
Otherwise, I won't let you eat it. What'd
Yeah.
you get?
Jersey Mike's hoagie.
Okay. So is that just like lettuce and a single tomato?
You would be surprised. Jersey Mike's, like, I'm a man who likes cheese, and
That's true.
they are one slice of cheese on this sandwich away from me being like, guys, you gotta calm down here.
Wow, it's almost too much cheese.
Almost too much cheese, and it's a
Wow.
mixture of provolone and Swiss that comes
Okay.
on the standard veggie. Also onions, lettuce, tomato,
Have I
banana
told you?
pepper, and then whatever else. But go ahead.
Have I told you that I have recently come around to raw onions on sandwiches?
Oh my god, thank goodness. They're so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I mean, only over the last like few months, this calendar year.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah,
I used to hate raw onions.
I will put raw and cooked onions on a sandwich. You get like some
Yeah.
what's the word for them? I'm having presque-vu.
Fried onions,
Not fried onions.
crispy
Caramelized.
onions,
Yeah, caramelized.
caramelized onions.
You put caramelized and raw onions, and I'll eat both.
The
Every time it's a
caramelization
wah.
process is great. I'm meal prepping breakfast and lunch burritos now.
Okay.
Not the same burrito, but they both incorporate onions,
Sure.
and they are both delicious. But yeah, real big into caramelized onions. Although
it's so good.
Sydney never cooks with onions because she's not a big onion fan. So like, I haven't cooked with onions in years because
Okay,
Sydney does
sure.
most of our cooking.
I
Just
always cook
the
with onions.
smell. I love it. She hates it, but the smell of those cooking onions is like,
Oh, it's so good.
oh, waft it.
Absolutely.
All right, well, go eat your veggie hoagie and
Will
go
do.
watch the Brave Little Toaster.
You too.
I will. I probably will watch it.
If it's streaming, I'm gonna watch it.
Oh yeah, it's probably on Disney Plus, right?
I hope so. We're gonna find out.
All right, I'll see you. All right, people. Thanks for hanging out. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week, the week after, something like that, hanging out, having a good time. Good night, people. For anybody who may or may not be on PlayStation, I will almost definitely be on that. If you don't know who you are, I'm confused. So, with that being said, goodbye.